Hi all, this is part 2 of composing your own piece from original loops on Bandlab. Let's start off by looking back to what we did last time. Last time we made a drum beat and we started to add some chords as well. Now if you haven't done that yet, if you haven't finished doing those yet, please go back to the previous tutorial and make sure you've spent some time making your own drum beat and adding some chords. I'm just going to show you some of the common mistakes that people made when putting them together. If we go to the drum machine now, we can double click on it. Oh no, if we don't double click on it, if it doesn't work, if you press on instrument in the bottom left hand corner, if double clicking doesn't work, you can get up your drum loop that you used. One of the things that made people's drums sound not as good as others was not having the basics in place. Remember, the basics is you have a kick drum on beat 1, you have a snare drum on this beat here, which is just 4 squares in, so it's at the start of the kind of darker shaded section, and then another kick drum here at the start of the lighter section, and another snare drum at the start of the darker section. And then the hi-hats, the closed hi-hats, which is these red ones here, are going to be on every 2 squares all the way along. Have that there as the basics, and then you can put some other stuff in, then you can customize it. But if you don't have the basics there, it'll sometimes sound a little bit random, so try and make sure you've got those in. So check your drum beat, make sure it sounds like a proper drum beat. If not, check you've got those basics. Let's have a look at the other part, the chords that we've added. Now if I click on the chords, it'll come up with a keyboard here. What I need to do is go to the Midi Editor, which is on the bottom left hand corner just there. And then I can see what I put in. Now, some of the people's chords that didn't quite work, one of the common mistakes was making sure that the chords are using the correct notes on the keyboard. What we're looking for is for each chord to be one note, like this note here, this is an A, then miss a white note, there you go, to the C, then miss a white note, and to the E. So it's like play one, miss one, play one, miss one, play one. That's a correctly put in chord. But you'll see that what that doesn't mean is on these smaller lines, play one, miss one, play one, miss one, it doesn't quite work like that because there's different numbers of whites and black notes on the keyboard. So use the keyboard picture on the left hand side here to decide what notes you're playing. Make sure that you're only using white notes for this composition, and you can see that I have the white notes are the lighter grey parts here, so I'm only using white notes. And even though they kind of look here like they're not quite evenly spread because of the different numbers of white and black notes, they are evenly spread on the keyboard on the left. So use the picture of the keyboard on the left to judge where you're going to put your chords. And make sure that they are play one, miss one, play one, miss one, play one, to get a nice sounding chord. If it doesn't quite work, have a look back at it. So what I want you to do now is to pause your video, have a look back at your last bit of your composition, and just check your drum beat and your chords and make sure it's all working. When you've done that, come back to this video and I'll show you the next bit. Okay, hopefully now you've got a fully working drum part and chords part. Let's now add on a couple of new elements today. So the next thing we're going to add is a bass line. Now before we add the bass line, I want to see what chords I've got. Okay, here's my first chord, it's this part here, and a chord, remember, is 3 notes happening at the same time, or more than 1 note happening, in this case 3, and it's starting you can see I've got 3 notes added in here. They're all white notes, and what I want to know is what is the name of the lowest note. Now, not all the notes on the picture of the keyboard are actually named, but I can see where C is. There's C. So if I do my alphabet, I've got, and I go backwards in my alphabet, I've got C, B, A. That's the first note, and it's an A note. So I can call this an A chord. That's my first chord. Now I've actually added in a second chord. You don't have to, you could just do one, but I've added in a second chord. And again, I've got 3 notes here. Let's find out what the lowest one is. So there's C, and it's actually on this one here, the next white note up. So in the alphabet, that would be A, B, C, D. That would be a D chord. So I've got a D here as well. Remember, when you're working out what the notes are, we count music notes with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it goes back to A again. There is no H, I'm afraid, in music. It goes back to A again. Okay, so I've worked it out now. My chords are A and then D. Now I'm going to use that to help me with my bass line. So now let's add a new track. I'm going to go to the top left-hand corner, press Add Track. I'm going to do an instrument on the left hand side here. There we go. And I've added in my new instruments. There we go. It's just called instrument 2. And do you know what? I'm going to call that bass, so I know what it is. And while I'm here, let's call this chords as well, so I know what it is. Right, now the bass is going to be a lower part. It's going to be nice and low, and it's also going to play the same as the root notes of my chord. First of all, let's select a bass. I'm going to go to the instrument panel in the bottom left hand corner. There we go. The type of instrument I want to choose is going to be either a bass, which is like a bass guitar, or if you want it to sound a bit more electronic-y, the synth bass has lots of good sounds that are a bit more electronic-y. I'm going to do a synth bass. And then in the next menu is all the different synth basses you can use. There's all sorts of ones. If you want to see what they sound like, try clicking on this little keyboard here. There you go, quite like that. Let's hear some others. There we go. And obviously these basses are going to sound best when they are low. Fancy bass. Let's try that. How fancy. Okay, I'm going to try, I quite like this first one. I'm going to use this first one. Right, now I am going to find, now I've heard what it sounds like. Back in the bottom left hand corner where it says instrument, I'm now going to go to the Midi Editor. This is a bit like what we did with the chords, and you can see the keyboard part here. And what I'm going to look for is what were the notes that were the bottom part of my chord. You might remember that I just looked through and I found out that my chords were A and D. So I'm going to find an A. There's my C, so let's go C, B, A. There we go, there's an A note. So I'm going to draw that note on, there we go, in the first square. There we go. My chords happen, and if I just go back to my chord part, you can see that my second chord happens on beat 1.3. There we go, so it's sort of halfway between there. So on there, on beat 1.3, let's now find a D, because that was my second chord to go on top. So I've got A, B, C, D. Here is a D. I could even, because it's a bass, if I wanted to, do it really low, because there's another C, D just down here. So let's do it. Let's make it nice and low to make it nice and bassy. And that's the start of my bass part. I've got an A and then I've got a D. Let's have a listen. And because I've chosen the notes which fit with the chords, my A note fits with my A chord and my D note fits with my D chord, it should sound good. Let's try it. There we go. They were a little bit difficult to hear because the chords were a bit loud on top. Let's turn the volume of the chords down a bit just for the moment and have a listen again. There we go. You can hear that happening. Now, it's all right, it works, but why don't we try making the pattern a bit more interesting? I've got my A just here, but I've got a few more squares. Let's try adding some more notes in there. I'm going to try putting one there, maybe one there as well. Let's see what it sounds like. And then let's put a few more Ds in there as well, okay? So I've got 3 A's and 2 D's there just to try and make the rhythm a bit more interesting. Let's have a listen to it now. There we go, that gives it a bit more of an interesting sound. I've still just used those notes, A and D, but by adding in a few more notes, it makes it a bit more interesting. Finally, I can go to the top right-hand corner of this loop here, the bass loop, click and drag, and now I've got my repeating bass line along with my chords. Let's hear it. And there we go, there's my song so far. So pause this video and have a go at making your bass line. Remember, you're just using the root notes of your chords. Find out what those notes are from your chord part, program them into the bass part, making sure you're just sticking to those notes. That really is the key to getting your piece sounding good. It's just making sure you're only using the root notes of the chords. Pause this video and have a go. Right, hopefully now you've had a go at making your bass line. Let's do one more thing today. Let's try and add a bit of a tune on top. So I'm going to press Add Track. I'm going to use another instrument track. I'm going to go to the bottom left-hand corner to my Instruments menu, and now I'm going to find a part to be my my melody line, something that's going to play a tune. Now I can choose anything for this. I could have a guitar, I could have some strings, I could have some voices if you want. I haven't tried those, it might be interesting. I'm going to go with some synth leads though, because I think the lead sounds are quite good for the melody line. So I'm going to press synth leads, and then let's have a listen to some of these leads. Let's click on one, try the keyboard, see what they sound like. There we go, these ones sound quite electronic-y. Funky clav, very funky. Let's try this heavy lead. There we go, very nice. Let's try the hyperpop synth, why not? Oh, that sounds annoying. Okay, let's go for glitch lead. Oh, also annoying. I wonder if I can find one that isn't annoying. Let's try the heavy lead again. I think that was all right. Right, I'm going to go for that one. Okay, so, and then the last thing I'm going to make is this is basically going to be a higher pitched tune which happens on top of my bass and my chord part. So let's make a new track here. I'm going to go to the Midi Editor one more time in the bottom left hand corner. And now I'm going to find, you'll see that I'm a bit higher up now because I've got C5 and C6, whereas I was using C2 and 3, which are a lot lower, but that's okay, we want it to be high. And I'm going to find a note to put in. Now a good note to start with will be the first note of your chord again. So if you remember, my first chord was an A chord. I think it would sound good to start with an A. There we go, I've added in an A now. And then what I'm going to do is over the course of this bar, of this little section here, the pink section I've added, I'm going to make up a little tune. Now the guidelines are stick to white notes. Okay, stick to white notes. Don't use any of the darker lines here, the black lines. Try and just use the white notes. And then have a go at making some little parts and see what it sounds like. So I'm going to try and dot some sounds in. I'm going to add in another A note here. Then I'm going to jump up here. Let's go to this note here. And let's make a little pattern coming down. And then going up again. Right, I did that pretty randomly. I haven't done loads of notes, and I've made sure that I haven't got more than one at the same time. No, that's going to be confusing. That's going to be another chord. Let's get rid of it. Just one note at a time. And then I've made some gaps as well, because gaps are important. And then there's a few little jumps. So this one jumps up, but then comes up and down a bit with notes that are closer together. But at no point have I used the black notes or these lines here. So hopefully it should sound all right. Let's find out. Let's press play. There we go, that's all right. I think that's working quite well. But if you don't like it, you could always go, actually, I don't like this note here. I'm going to get rid of it and try going down to this one instead and see if that sounds any better. Yeah, actually, I think I liked how it was before. Let's put it back up on that D note there. There we go. And you can delete notes by pressing the delete key on your keyboard. So when you've got your final tune, when you're happy with it, you can then again go to the top right-hand corner of the loop, click and drag it, and there we go. We've got a repeating pattern. So let's hear my whole loop so far. And there we go. So for your project today, go back onto Bandlab. If you haven't already, make your bass line and then have a go at making your lead sound, your melody, let's call it the melody, the tune that goes on top, the thing that you'll be humming back. Da, 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 da. Hopefully be humming that to yourself. And yeah, and then submit your project and your teacher will have a little listen and see what it sounds like. Good luck. Enjoy.